how am I going to take rap music, you know what I'm saying, and turn it into something else? I struggle. People don't understand how much I struggle with this. I retired from it prior to my Garris, thinking that I was done with it forever. If it wasn't for, feeling very strongly that it was something that I felt Hashem wanted me to do, and a little bit of pressure from my wife and best friend and some rabbis I met in the community and different things, I wouldn't have returned to it. But what happened is over time, what I started to see is that it actually elevated my spirituality and my relationship and my connection with Hashem, because I felt such a achrayus to be able to use it as a tool to be able to spread light.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have an incredibly interesting guest. His name is Nissim Black. You might know him as a very famous American Israeli rapper who converted to Judaism, made Aliyah with his wife and I believe 7 children, and is continuing to make extremely inspiring music from there. Thank you so much for joining us, Nissim.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
So I thought your story is just so fascinating, and I wanted to share it with our crowd. So let's just start at the beginning, and then we'll get into all the different things like what inspires you and the point of your music and all that. But let's start with your story. You were born,
So,
your
yeah,
early life.
my early life. Okay, so I was born originally in Seattle, Washington. I was born to hip hop parents. Both my mother and my father both helped pioneer rap music actually in Seattle. So they started very early, like 1980 or something like that. At
Mm,
that time, hip hop was more so just about having fun. It wasn't what it's what it morphed into today. But it was just definitely a way for them to have fun. It was a new outlet for young people. And in
were they
addition,
celebrities with that, or
they
like
were
were they?
celebrities. They
They
were
were okay.
celebrities. In fact, if you go to the, I don't know if they have it because they're changing museums all the time, but I remember when I was younger, the EMP Museum, which is a music museum in the heart of Seattle, named after this Jimi Hendrix Experience place, that they had a mural of my parents. So
Oh
that was really
wow,
big for me. I remember seeing them come because they actually pioneered it there. So their first records was the beginning of rap. I'm telling you, yeah. But so still to this day, it was
wow,
a
that's
big thing for
amazing.
me. It was a big thing
Right.
for me later in my career. In
How did
addition
they
to
get
that,
into it? They just got into music. They just enjoyed it.
I think it just nobody understood how fast it was going to spread. The
Mm,
first, I mean, what's attributed to the first rap song, rap actually started earlier than this, but the first mainstream rap song came out in 1979. Sugar Hill Gang, Uptown Records. It
mm.
was called Rapper's Delight, and that song came out. A lot of people, the world had never even known what it was.
Mm.
So the young generation immediately gravitated to it. So it was a very beginning. So by 1980 already, my parents were, cutting their first record. So
Wow.
it was very early on.
So
So
was it assumed that you just would go into that, into music as well?
I don't think it was assumed when I was younger. It wasn't one of
Mm,
those things where I was pushed that way because my parents definitely deviated. They split when I was 2, but both of them were both
mm,
drug dealers as well.
mm.
So back in those days, rap and drug dealing didn't actually go together. Today it's like those things have become synonymous. But back then they would have never spoke about that in music. It was much more censorship in music at that time. But anyway,
Mhm.
so and that so growing up with that, I was able to see, a different life. I don't think anybody had any expectations until I came more into. I was always told as a kid from aunties, uncles, and my parents that I was going to be a talented artist at one time because any
Mm.
camera, any camcorder music came on, I was either dancing, singing, rapping, doing something. So it was a
Wow.
passion of mine that I knew I had from the time that I was a kid.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. So what was it like growing up in a home which was full with drugs and which had drug dealers as your parents?
The truth is that when you grow up in the environment, you're not really thinking that much about like, is this normal? Is it not normal? It's just this is life for you. So
Mm.
you grow up with this type of life. It's perpetuated back into the community through the music, through through what you see on TV, the movies, and things that we grew up seeing that was mirrored back to us. Just perpetuated the same lifestyle. So you never really thought of anything outside of that. So I would go to school and see somewhat to some degree some normalcy of life and whatever. But by the time I got off the school bus, I came back home. There was kilos of cocaine on the table and weed or garbage bags full of weed and people with the guns all over that. So that was just very used to that type of environment. So it wasn't until I got much older that I started to think I mean, at least into my teenage years when I got into a different environment, that I started to notice that maybe everybody didn't live like this. So when you grow up in it,
Interesting.
you're just there.
So you never realized that there was anything different there, or you never thought that there was anything wrong with it. It was just part of life.
You knew it was wrong because I remember watching. I remember one night I was 5 years old. I think we lived in Bellevue, so we were outside of the main heart of Seattle, and especially like the neighborhood that we grew up in. And we had an apartment there. But I remember the night when my stepfather came back from a gunfight. It was him and a few other people. He was shot. A few other people were shot, and his best friend was killed. So I remember the emotion of that night and the emotion of being battle ran by the FBI. I think I was 8 years
Mm,
old when the FBI came in, and so we knew, it was wrong, but you don't really like know that there's something else. You understand?
right,
So
right.
it's a very interesting thing. So there's somewhat of a conscious. You grow up, running from the police, getting in trouble, running with street gangs. I was doing that very early. By
Mm,
9, I was already smoking pot. By the time I was
wow.
12, I was already running with a street gang. So I was very, very exposed to all these things very early on. And my parents were young. So, I don't know if they had the wherewithal or the maturity enough to separate what they did in their private life and their public life. Everything was on
Mm,
full display before me.
mm. Wow, fascinating. And you said your parents split when you were very young, when you were 2. So were you with your mother or with your father?
So I was with my mother, and then my mother remarried. I mean, they dated for obviously a long time, but I grew up with him in the house from the time I was 2. So my stepfather, I referred to him as stepfather just to make the distinction for the public, but he was really my dad. I grew up with him,
Mm.
and I actually have a close relationship with my dad, my stepfather, and my biological father. So that was
Till
a great thing. Says till
till to,
today,
till
till
today.
today.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Incredible.
different different paths in life. My biological father, who made a major change. He was a very, very well recognized, not only in music but well recognized as a drug dealer as well. So he's
Mm,
changed his life. He's become a pastor. He's a theologian today, professor at a Bible university, and he heads an addiction program and leads a church. So he and I, although we've landed in different places theologically, to some degree, it brought us closer because of the triumph of changing our lives, and it's actually brought us much closer together.
that's incredible. Wow. And did he introduce you to religion in your earlier years, or was he a part of that, or no?
So he became a part of it after. The first introduction to religion came from my grandfather, my mother's father, who had
Mm,
unfortunately spent most of his life in prison. He was out on parole. He came to live with us for about a year and a half, and he actually introduced me to Islam. So
mm,
Islam was the religion that I first had come to know. I would pray with him, 5 times a day. He would take me to the mosque on Fridays, and more than anything else, that was the beginning of my, introduction, I guess I would say, or entering into some type of religious system. Prior to that, my grandfather, before he came home, he was in prison, so he couldn't send me anything that was, I guess per se, that was actually like of Islamic faith. I don't know why, it just wasn't an option. Whatever program he was sending gifts to his grandchildren from prison didn't allow. It was probably Christian organizations. They usually
mm,
lead those type of things in chaplain and different things. So he didn't want to get me anything inherently Christian because he was, very strong
mm,
Muslim. So he did send me a DVD that was called the Prayer of Jabez, which is Yabetz in Hebrew, which is a prayer that takes place in the book of Chronicles. So I remember the spiritual stirring that I had from watching this DVD. Now, it was probably done also by a Christian organization, but it wasn't Christian per se. It was a DVD that really talked about this prayer and talked about the power of prayer. So already at maybe 7 years old, I was very, very into prayer and spirituality just from this DVD. And I remember watching it
mm,
over and over and over again. So by the time he came, I guess he sought to correct it, and he taught me Islam. And unfortunately, he was home for about a year and a half before he ended up back in prison. So
mm.
from that time on, I just would have said I was a Muslim until I was maybe 13 years old.
And what happened then?
So at 13 was my year of trouble, finding myself in a major way because it was like at the peak of my trouble, but it was at the peak of this place of me feeling very, very spiritually inclined, intuitive. I was getting, more and more signals from inside that wanted to strengthen myself spiritually. I have no idea where it came from. Nothing prompted it, but it was just, probably that chemical imbalance of becoming from a
Mm.
preteen to a
Teenager.
teenager.
Mm.
So whatever it was very, very heavy. So I was going through so many different identity shifts. So I was expelled from the school district that year. I wasn't allowed in the public school district. And at the same time, I recorded my first professional songs. There was a producer that took me in like a little brother, and really he pushed me, but he was like, already a well-known producer at that time. So him taking a chance on me was a really big deal for me at that time. So in addition to that, there was a friend of mine who was a part of a hip hop program at a Christian organization. So he, after some time, convinced me to go with him to this organization. I went there, and this place was a safe haven. Now, this was the beginning of me seeing what I would say healthy relationships. It was the
Mm.
beginning of me being in an environment every day, and this place became a safe haven for me. I was there every single day, and initially it had nothing to do with religion itself. I mean, we would talk about God and all this. These things were all, gumbo in my head,
Mm.
cholent, whatever. I had no
Mhm.
idea, so to speak. And actually, I think about that now. Gumbo, which is really very hard to ever make it kosher. But the truth is, it's like safe. It's like seafood cholent in the non-Jewish world.
Right. Right.
But anyway, so I find myself in this program, and these people, I'm building very good rapport. So after being there about a year, they invited me to go with them to this camp. It was like a Christian getaway missionary camp, and I went there. And up until that time, my life for sure was the best time I ever had in my life. It was just the first time I got to just be a kid. When you go into an immersive
Mm.
environment outside of something that you're familiar with, that was life changing for me. So I just got to be a kid. There was no, my house, like I said, 40, 50 people going in and out any day. It was a lot of trafficking.
Wow.
And if not trafficking, my house was just the hangout spot. So
Mm.
being there in the camp in that environment gave the ability for questions and them asking questions. So it was a very powerful program they put on there, powerful speaker. At the end, it ended with what they call an altar call. I went down and gave my life to Jesus at that time. And it was the beginning of something that would take the idea of religion and spirituality from something that felt a little bit more distant to something that was very, very close. I immediately
Mm.
connected to the Bible, immediately connected to prayer, and I became a strong Bible thumping Christian. And it was perfect because the timing of when it happened, because I initially got expelled. I think I was 12 when I got expelled. Actually, that year it was a year before,
Mm.
because I spent 2 years in the alternative school district. So what happened is, after I came back from that summer camp, I had a letter in the mail that was allowing me to go to a regular public high school. So I had this,
Mm.
radical change take place for me at this camp. Now I get a new lease on life, so I get an opportunity to start things over. So that's how I went into high school, as a very strong Bible thumping Christian.
Interesting. Wow. So I'm picturing this young boy who was extremely talented, growing up in this chaotic environment full of drugs, drug selling and pushing and all that. And yet this person who has a very sensitive soul from a young age, even you said
Hmm.
from 7, and it
Hmm.
keeps on increasing as time goes on.
Right.
Your quest for God. And I guess that quest is something that's stayed with you till today, really.
Yeah, yeah. And these things is it's so interesting, because as I went into high school, I I just everything was so clear for me that the most important thing in my life at that time was my spirituality. It was probably a little
Mm.
bit too clear. I probably should have been like, instead of reading my Bible, doing my homework. But I
Right.
was I was I was a very, what we say, tactless. It was about the purpose, the main purpose. What is it of life? And I was always like that. So what happens is, after I get into high school, because I had the rap talent, I became very popular. I won a lot of the
Mm.
rap battles and different things like that. And so that sort of started to distract me from my spirituality.
Mm.
My 10th grade year happens, and I don't know why. I was halfway through the year. Everything is sort of like, that, uh, you know, romance that I was having with the Bible and my spirituality is sort of waned. It was my 10th grade year. I remember walking in halfway through the school year, And it was as if the whole entire world stopped. I started looking around and I started to notice, these friends I had, I grew up with, I felt so disconnected. I felt as if I knew something nobody else knew. It was a major, like, spiritual moment, almost like, such an experience I don't really know how to describe. And I felt deep down inside something saying, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. And I
Because they
really
weren't
feel
into religion? Is that why? They weren't into God or
it.
spirituality?
I don't think so. With some crazy the worldly feeling. I mean, only now I can probably explain it that
Mm,
maybe that was my neshama letting me know that
mm,
I had a Yiddish neshama. I had a Jewish
wow.
soul because I felt so out of place. It was nothing at that point. I wasn't even that religious. I mean, I was
Hmm.
religious and I was definitely staying out of trouble compared to where I was. It was like night and day.
Mm,
But at that time, I was more so focused on football and on,
hmm.
on the sports, the
Normal
music, or
things that
whatever,
teenagers
normal
do,
things that
right?
teenagers are doing. But
Right.
that felt like such a strong urge for spirituality at this moment. Just this one instant of walking down the hallway, nothing prompted it. And after that, I went and got involved in every single Bible study group, every single leadership program. I went back and I became even more religious and more spiritual. By the time I was in my 10th grade year, in addition to, like, focusing, being a football jock, I became the poster child for this Christian organization. I
Mm,
was bringing more than half of the high school kids for all the different programs, the camps, the leadership programs, this Bible study groups. So I got very, very active after that. And I was, to some degree, I was searching, trying to figure out what that moment was. So I
mm.
had like spiritual antennas up. I don't know why. I was very spiritual. And none of this makes sense considering how I grew up and what I grew up in. As much as I love my mother, she was not that spiritual.
Yeah,
You
what
know,
did she
I don't
think
know
of
what's
this
that.
this whole spirituals quest of yours? You were living at
Everybody,
home then,
you know
right?
what? Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And everybody thought it was a phase. Everybody just thought,
Right.
it's just a phase and whatever. He had an Islam phase. Now he's in a Christian phase,
Right.
whatever the case is, whatever. He's got to, nobody really stopped me. And then the next thing would be is that summer, going into my 11th grade year, which was another big game changer, I met my wife. So me and my wife are high school
Mhm.
sweethearts. So we met
Wow.
that summer. And we went in the next year to high school. We went to rival high schools. So I always tell her it's such a miracle that we're together because I can't believe I married any girl from that other high school. That's our personal joke. And then that's when she answers to me, "You're still living in high school."
Right.
So anyway, so she was a game changer for me because she ended up becoming an anchor. She had been more raised as a Christian, so she had a much more stronger, I guess I say, religious foundation. But by this time in her life, when I met her, she had left her family's denomination of Christianity and became a Seventh Day Adventist. Which
Mm,
they obviously moved. They worship on Saturday. They try to keep what they call biblical kosher. They don't eat certain animals, and she was a vegetarian. So,
mm,
so she had sort of been on her own path of growth. So time will fast forward. I'd be maybe at the end of my 11th grade year when a demo of mine made it to the desk of a major talent scout at a big record label. That talent scout reached out to me, was very interested in my music, and after a while, they convinced me because of what was very popular at the time was gangster rap. 50 Cent was the biggest thing, the hottest artist at that time. I ended up at that point changing my style, thinking I wasn't going to change my personality, just the music, and surely found myself in a very, very dark place. I was not sure
mm,
about who I was, and it led me back to this place where I thought I'd sort of escaped it, but I didn't. Slowly but surely, to keep up the image, the
mm,
friends that I had sort of like distanced myself from had became my inner circle again. And so I'm
mm,
around all these guys, but then I have this amazing girlfriend that when I'm with her, I'm one way. When I'm with them, I'm the other way. And it's
mm.
easier to be one or the other, but to be both is the most confusing, dark thing ever in your life.
That's
So
very true.
it
Right.
was
Wow.
very, very tough for me. So I went on to finish
So
high
these
school.
two parts of you, that's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it was all there. So
And
my
I guess it shows also what, like the impact and the influence of friends and also music, what we're
no,
doing with ourselves.
no doubt about it. No doubt
Yeah.
about it. One of the main things I've always tell people as they are on their growth or they see themselves wanting to grow and being held back. That's for a lot of people. That's that place. It's like where I really want to grow. I really see it, but I'm like held back. Something's pulling me back, and most of the time,
Mm,
it's environment, it's
mm,
friends, it's the people that you're around. We don't
mm,
realize how much. we pander and flatter other people in order to meet expectations of others,
Right.
in order to make ourselves, feel like we're being true to ourselves. And the
Mm,
truth is that nobody will never know themselves as long as you are around people that cause you to be one way. Until
right.
you separate yourself from everybody and make Hashem, make God your resting place, your place of fortune. Unless you go there and you spend a considerable amount of time, I don't mean you have to completely leave society, but it means that that needs to be a core, amount of your day and your time and dedication and focus. That even if you're doing something else, that your head is always there. That when a person finds themselves there, that's when you'll find who you are. But it'd be very, very hard to find who you are in the environment of others that are, especially in something that's not, conducive to
And
an environment of growth.
how would you do that? Like, how would you spend your time thinking about God? Like, you just spend
So
time
what I
thinking about God, or
Yeah, so I'll tell you this. So, in conjunction with the story, I'll tell you this what happened. So, I fast forward a bit. I ended up losing my mother, unfortunately, to an overdose. She died
Mm,
from drug use. I was 19. She was 37. That was another thing that cracked my heart. The next
I'm
year,
sure
uh,
that must
I
have had a huge impact on you.
the impact. I wouldn't have wished the pain on my worst enemy, even with all of
Mm,
my mother's challenges. She was still my best friend
your
up
mother,
to that point
right,
in my. She
wow.
was my mother, and she was. We had gotten to that point. I was already a teenager, so she was talking to me more. She loved my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time,
Mhm.
and she was somebody that I would speak to all the time. So to one day instantly not have her,
Lose her,
it was a very
wow.
big pain. But the pain, in retrospect, I'm so thankful for because it humbled me. It was a
Mm,
humbling experience for me at that time in my life, feeling like I'm about to sign this contract, I'm going to be bigger and larger than life, and everything else. And then someone that is an anchor in your life to
mhm,
instantly be gone, you realize that you don't control anything. You're not the one in control.
mm,
So it brought
mm,
me to sort of to a place, in addition to the hurt, of submissiveness. So by the time the next year rolled around and I'd had my success, I released that album shortly after using my mother. I used the emotion and I fueled it. I didn't want to, sit in it. So what happened is that I finished my record. I started getting a lot of press. The newspapers, local newspapers that started locally, they figured out who my parents were, and that became like this story that started to
mm,
spread from more and more magazines, and it started to spread organically without ever doing a contract. So there was another artist who wanted to get himself out there, and he made a song about me that wasn't so pleasant. And the end of
oh.
it, we ended up getting into a physical altercation, which led
Really?
to a friend of mine trying to take his life. So my friend ended up getting an attempt of murder because he went to try
Oh
to
my
kill the
gosh,
person
wow. To
after this
defend you,
altercation to
right,
defend
wow.
me. And unfortunately, he ends up in custody. But when he misses, he doesn't shoot the other guys. They now think that I sent somebody to kill them. So they
Mhm,
thinking if they don't come take my life, then I'm gonna come finish it. So
mm,
it was a major time of fear for me. I didn't know what was going to be, that either I took these guys' life or they were going to come after me. So it was that led me in to praying like I've never prayed before in my life. I
mm,
remember sitting in my living room, and after, finding out everything, what all the pieces was, I fell to my knees and I started screaming and praying to God.
mm,
And that sensitivity that came from this situation. I mean, I guess I should say that a few days after the guy called me, we talked everything out, which was a miracle. I tell everybody to
mm,
this day, I really believe God heard my prayers, because where I come from, nobody ever calls you to verify if you're trying to kill them or not. It's just not a question you're
sure.
going to get.
Right, exactly.
That next year I went on to lose about 8 friends. They were all killed, gun violence, all
Mhm,
from other friends that we grew up with, from misunderstandings. Nobody called, and I knew that there was equal ability on both sides to be able to squash things ahead of time, but it didn't happen, and I had that opportunity. So I made it up and made my resolve that I wasn't going to allow anything to shape or change, what had just taken place. I was going to dedicate myself to God, and I didn't even know what that meant at that point.
mhm,
So went right back into Christianity. But this is the moment. This is what I'm talking about. I didn't allow myself to hang out with any friends. I didn't
mm,
answer my phone for anybody. I was already, by this time, Me and my wife were engaged, I think, at this time. We had
Mhm.
already had our own apartment. And I stayed home every day and I walked around in my living room and I prayed and prayed and prayed.
Mhm.
And it was during this time that I decided I would pick up the Bible again. I loved the
Mhm.
Bible as a kid and I picked it up and it was as if my eyes was different. I started to see things specifically around the Nevi'im and the prophets, typical Bible verses that would be used inside of, the church, or I was really more so a part of the Bible study programs more than I was going to church. I was a Christian 6 days a week. Sundays I left for the NFL for football. Me and God
Right.
had an arrangement, but
Right.
so but throughout the rest of the week I was very very busy with this. So, but now at this time when I had been to some degree estranged from religion, Christianity, or anything, I'm picking back up the Bible and I'm reading it, and I can't help but notice this beautiful relationship between God and the Jewish people. And
Mm.
I start asking now all these questions, and I don't have anybody to ask these questions to. So I end up on Google, and I'm starting to watch debates, and I'm looking up different things, and that was like the beginning of this journey that ultimately led me to where I am today.
That's incredible. I know you also had Chabad.org had a big impact in your
Chabad,
research.
wow, wow, wow. I mean, listen, the truth is that, especially during this time, I don't know how everything works now. I haven't had too many searchings, but anything Jewish you put up, you were either going to get Chabad.org either first or second, and then any
Right.
type of like messianic, Christian like group, like you're going to find one or the other. So I started going on both actually. So that's what I was doing. I initially connected to Messianic Judaism, which is like Jews for Jesus organization, because it was a gradual understanding of,
Mhm.
I guess I would say, of removing layers or removing clothing to some degree, garments from God, and that's the way I've
Mhm.
always looked at the other religions also as well. Like I never came to a place where I'm like, oh well, when I was a Muslim, I didn't really believe in God, or when I was a Christian, I really
Mm.
didn't, because it's not really true. The truth is that I actually did, and I don't feel like. That I was believing in a different God. But what I do believe is that there's a certain amount of clarity that I had. There were certain garments that were taking off that allowed me to be able to have this limitless, connection to God directly, and there's no
Wow.
intermediary. So it was a
I mean,
very
that's
very
what
beautiful
Maimonides
experience.
says, right? That the
Right.
different religions help us to get to Judaism, to
Absolutely.
understand the truth of Judaism. Interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it was a powerful experience for me at that time because I ordered what did I had? I ordered a Quran. I had five different versions of the Christian Bible, and a JPS Tanakh, a Chumash, and I was 8 hours a day going through all these different texts. That's what I was doing until my brain was fried. After this, I went into a state of, and this is still all the while. I only had one friend that I talked to, and Baruch Hashem, he also became Jewish. But apart from him, I didn't talk to anybody. And he was dating my wife's sister, so we were all close.
Oh,
It was
wow.
just us four.
Incredible.
My best friend since kindergarten. We actually we married sisters, and we were all converted together. So that was
Beautiful.
the full story. But it started with us just, first me going off the deep end. My wife had no idea what I was doing. I'm going through all these different books, but I got this fire and desire to learn, and I want to know God more than I ever had before. And I started praying. I would go, 3 days in a row,
Mm.
fasting and going out crying to God. And during that time, it was very hard for me to make up to talk with family. Nobody was in the same place as me right at this time. It was like I have a time now to seek out God where I have no distractions, and I took it. I took it up on myself. It was hard for us financially at the time. It was hard for us in every single way. We didn't know really what the future has held. We were
Mhm.
expecting at this time, and so
Mm.
it was a very very interesting place to be. But it was fire filled, and then eventually my wife and I started learning
What did she
together.
feel about what you were doing?
In the
What was her
beginning, she
reaction?
thought I was nuts, and she was probably
Yeah.
right.
Right.
In the beginning, she thought I was crazy, and but after some while, she came talk to me because she had her own spiritual journey when she was younger,
Mhm.
going from Southern Baptist Pentecostal to then Seventh Day Adventist on her own. The Sabbath was, I think, the beginning of making her realize that she already knew the Sabbath was the Sabbath.
Mhm.
So what
Mhm.
else is probably not true? And as she
Mhm.
started to go on her own journey, she came to me one day and said, "I feel like I just been bamboozled my whole entire life. What, like,
Mhm.
what do we do?" And so we started just, learning together every day and growing and praying. And then her sister was always over. So, and my brother-in-law. So eventually we all started learning together, and it was just us four. And I was holding like Bible study groups for the whole entire neighborhood. And I didn't know what I was talking about, but as soon as I learned something new, I
You taught.
introduced it to everybody else. I taught it to everybody else. And then eventually we found a Messianic congregation that was very, very more so, I would say, in between conservadox in their observance. It
Mhm.
was which was a major culture shock from us. I had been to church before, but I had never been to a place where they read from a Sefer Torah and they're praying out of Art Scroll Sidorim and everything else. It
Mhm.
was in Hebrew, a lot of it. So most of the service was in Hebrew. So I was very, I had to catch up. So I spent more and more time. This led me to spending more and more time on Chabad.org, which
Mhm.
eventually interested me in Judaism. So I ended up going to a rabbi on the east side over in the Bellevue area, Rabbi Farkash from Chabad. And the more and more he saw we got interested, and he said, "Are you guys, serious?" We finally told him, "I said, Rabbi, I think we're interested in converting." So he sends me back to my childhood neighborhood because I grew up in the Jewish neighborhood in Seward Park there, and he sent me back there, and that's how we started our journey.
Wow, you came full circle, but in a
Came,
totally different way. Wow.
yeah,
Um,
totally different way.
so what was it that attracted you to Judaism? Like, what was it? What inspired you when you were looking into Judaism? Do you remember any of the teachings or something that you felt really resonated
Absolutely.
with you?
Absolutely. Well, really, what you find, I think, specifically in Orthodox Judaism, as people are getting inspired, the overwhelming majority, I would say, I think anybody can, quote me on this, come from, evangelical Christianity of some sort, and what happens, I think, most of us is there's this major focus on eschatology, end time studies, biblical prophecy, and one of the things that you cannot escape is the fact that every single prophecy surrounds the Jewish people, surrounds
Mhm,
Israel.
mhm,
Years ago, many, many years ago, during the time of the church fathers and the Orthodox Church, it was very easy for them to say the Jews are cursed; they'll never return. Now the replacement theology is talking about us, but after 1948 and the reestablishment of Israel and Jews returning back to Israel, it's very hard to say those biblical verses are
right,
talking about some new spiritual Israel when you
right,
see the hand of God happening before you. So here I was, I had never known anything about Jewish history. So the biggest thing, and I know this sounds crazy, but it was actually the fact that the Jewish people were suffering throughout their life, and
mhm,
I
mhm,
didn't know anything about it. I went to public school, at least for most of my years, but I had never heard of the Holocaust. So I didn't even
mhm,
know what it was. So as I'm starting to search more and more about Hashem, I need proofs that Hashem, that you're
mhm,
here, that you're with me. I need to know which way is the real right way. So by this time, this was right before actually I moved to the community. I did all my research going through Jewish history. I had a book, I think maybe by Beryl Wine or something at that time,
mhm,
that gave about Jewish history. And so I started looking up all this stuff, and I'm saying, wow, look at the mouth of Moses, look at the mouth of the prophets. They predicted all of these things, which actually came to pass. Not only that, the return of the Jewish people, the return of the vegetation. I started to see all of these things, the agriculture of Israel being a sign, from the book of Ezekiel, 36th chapter, that this is the return of the Jews, that this was the fingerprint of God. So it became very, very hard for me to deny it, right?
mhm,
There was no way for me to go around it. So that was one of the biggest things, but it was ultimately also on top of that was the ultimate story. I just talked about this recently on my own podcast. I have my own podcast now, and I was just talking about the ultimate story of grace. And it's no disrespect to the Christian faith, but they think this is the ultimate story of grace of Jesus dying for our sins. The ultimate story of grace is that the most critical um, people, entity, place of Jewish people. The most critical are Jewish people. I mean, we're not
mhm.
talking about just now today. We're talking about look at the Bible. It's been I don't know what the percentage is of bad press that's going on inside the prophets and other.
Right.
Unlike any other religion, by the
Anything
way,
else, right? We
no
we say
nobody
it,
else
it
is.
says it as it is,
It
right?
says
Like,
says it
nope,
as
no
it
good
is.
PR, no fine tuning the story, right?
Exactly, exactly. And
Yeah.
what's the end of all the stories? The Gemara in Brachos talks about this. The end of all the stories is that the prophets ended with words of restoration, words of manucha, regathering
Mm,
and rebuilding the
mm,
relationship with God, and God ultimately saying to the Jewish people, I will never leave you. I will never
mm,
leave you. And this is compelling to me as a person who's had a life of many mistakes. And I'm looking at this
mm,
and saying, this is the real story of grace. This is the real
mm,
story of favor. So this led to me, and I think in addition to that, just a lot of the praying that I was doing at the. I mean, I was really praying. I was 2-3 hours at a time. I was sitting
mm.
and praying with God. You know, everything was literal for me. I didn't know anything about oral Torah or anything like that. So
Mm,
when I came to the Parshas Teruma, or the building of the tabernacle, and so I started like building my. I would put curtains up. I buy incense, light candles, put on music,
really?
and walk around and talk to God for hours. And but that created such a sensitive, a tangible relationship with Him. So by the
Mm,
time we enter into the community, we're ready to roll full of steam. And what's some learning curves, because when you come in on fire, when you're around a community of people who've been doing this their whole entire life, they don't
right,
see all the beauty that you just saw, on the way into the journey.
right,
So it kind of cooled us down a little bit. So I thought I was crazy, and then
right.
that's when I came across the Breslov books, and he started talking about his Bodhisattva, Rabbi Nachman, about prayer and solitude, and I realized, okay, I'm on to
This is
something. So.
right. Wow. So it's fascinating. I mean, there's so many fascinating parts. It's interesting that the suffering of the Jewish people was what attracted you when so many people are, questioning God because of the suffering. But this was a way that showed you the proof that this is the Jewish people.
Hmm.
But I wanna ask you about what you just said about, keeping the inspiration. I mean, you came into a place where people were born into it, and maybe they weren't so inspired because of it, and here you were discovering something that you found was just so fascinating.
Hmm.
How do you keep the inspiration till today? I mean, you've been in it now for a while, and how do you give your children, you have some children now, I mean, we're
Yeah,
fast forwarding a
7.
little bit, but you have 7 children with
Right.
that same girlfriend who became your wife, Adina,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
how do you stay inspired till today, and how do you give your children that inspiration that you were
Well,
on fire with?
the truth is that the Torah tells us that we are going to have times where Hashem, so to speak, hides His face from us. Esther El Panai, Hashem says He will hide His face. Now, in the Torah itself, a lot of these times it tells us that if we were to do something wrong, so maybe there perhaps was a mistake or something we've done in our relationship that caused the distance between us and Hashem. Later
Mhm,
on, we have the teachings of the Arizal and the books of Hasidut, of the Hasidus, that later on come to tell us that this is one of the ways that Hashem waxes and wanes with us altogether. We're
mhm,
like the moon. Hashem is like the sun. It's just as there's a waxing and waning. Sometimes we have these moments of when there's this ultra closeness to God and God's light is illuminating in a very tangible way, and sometimes with its constrictedness. Now the
mm,
truth is that for the sake of layman's terms, at least, I don't want to go as deep as the topic could call for. Now, what I've come to notice is that the up times keep me through the down times. The
mm,
moments where I don't feel as inspired, when I don't, there's a moment of recall. And if I can't close my eyes and picture the name of Hashem as good as I want to, or I don't have the inspiration to go through when I'm sitting down in front of a book or whatever the case is, or at the time that I'm praying. One of the things that I've come to do is I really try to close my eyes and focus and look back on all those good times. And there's actually a source for
mm,
this. And one of the books by Rabbi Natan of Breslov, he expounds on a certain teaching from Rabbi Nachman. And he says that just like we know that Joseph told Paro, he says that, there's going to be a time when there is this time of shefa, of revak, of abundance. And these 7 years that, according to Powell's dreams, he says that these dreams, the things that you saw, is telling you that a time of abundance is going to come for 7 years,
mhm,
which immediately will be followed by 7 years of famine. And so the
mm,
lesson he taught from this was that all the time when we feel up and we're excited and we feel that, it says hold on to all of those moments, because right
Mm.
after that comes those moments of cotness, restrictedness, and not feeling so close. So if you could hold on. So one of the things that I've found, and I think that this will work for anybody, and I think it's we don't realize how important it is to journal and to write,
Mm.
even if it's prayers to God. One of the biggest things that has saved me in one period of time when I was flying through the moon, and every day with Hashem, all day, every day, I was, spending a lot of time with Hashem and learning and praying and whatever. And I began to start writing things that, sometimes I felt like I didn't have the words. So I started writing prayers to God.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
one of these moments, I was feeling so down. I came across this book. I start crying like a baby, and I realized, and I held it up. I said, Hashem, remember me, remember me. This is me,
Mm.
this is me,
Mm.
and it pulled me up. So there's a concept, an idea of, even if you don't write anything, of always being, and we have this. This is a part of our everyday prayers, part of almost everything we do. Remember, Zecher Letziat Mitzrayim. Remember the time
Mm.
that I took you out of Egypt. God is constantly giving us reminders all the time, because we have to remember that high that we left out and we followed after God, in the desert like a young bridesmaid, that no one else would do. So we have to always be connected to the times and remember what it is that Hashem did for us, and that'll help us through the times of feeling distant as well.
Wow, interesting. And do you tell your children, do you encourage your children to journal as well, to journal the good
Absolutely.
times? How old
Absolutely.
how old are your children?
My daughter is 16,
Mm.
and then I have a 12-year-old. I'm making a bar mitzvah in a few months, thank God,
Oh,
my
wow.
first one.
Wow.
And then I have an 11-year-old boy and a 8-year-old daughter, 6-year-old son, 4-year-old son, and a 2-year-old daughter. So
Beautiful. Wow.
quite the
Wow.
busy house.
Yeah. How do they handle you traveling so much for your music?
It's getting hard. I'm slowing down. I'm focusing more now on the podcast and releasing more
Uh-huh.
content, like more premium content, documentaries, different things of that nature. So I'm slowing down. In the beginning, it was like, it was easy. The kids are a little bit younger,
Right.
everything's going. But now it's, as everybody's getting older, everybody's like, okay, Abba, it's time for you to be at home.
To be at home.
And then
Wow.
they're
Hard.
definitely letting me know every time I leave. There's like they try to take my suitcases.
Sure.
So we've gotten to the point. So I'm definitely over the next year hoping to spend a whole lot more time at home, but without, like, at the same time. I always say that you stop. I don't want to. My tafkid is very clear to me. I've spent a lot of time with the Shem, and he's made those things clear to me about being able to affect and inspire people to grow closer to Hashem in a way that's very clear in what we say public and for Hesi. I'm not hiding or tucking Hashem or my religion or my faith. And God gave me a platform to where I could do that. I have a lot of
Mm.
Christian followers. I have a lot of Noahide followers. I have a lot of people who are just genuinely interested in Torah and learning how to be close to Hashem. So for me, I have a obligation to also do that. But my first obligation is to take care of my family. So
Sure.
any way to be able to do both of those things, I'm going to do. But I'll probably be traveling less over the next couple of years.
Wow, interesting. So tell us about your, you after you converted, you decided to make Aliyah. Why did you decide to move to Israel?
The truth is, as I mentioned to you, I was a big Bible buff, so it's very hard
Mm.
for me. I find it to read Tanakh and not to have the
Mm.
desire to move, or at least to be in Israel at some point in life.
Sure.
So mine came very strongly, even from the time I was 7 when I got that DVD. Like I was very interested in being in the place, and I guess maybe something about me creating a space for Hashem all the time and talking with him and whatever. I understood um, the potency of being in a place of holiness. And
Sure.
I had a major desire to move to Israel.
Mhm.
Major desire to move to Israel. But just like at the beginning with Judaism, my wife didn't share that desire.
Right. I was
So,
just going to say that. How did she
you know,
feel about that? And the kids also,
you
right?
know, I
Yeah.
think I pushed it so much that we came to a point that we agreed that the word "is" was eliminated from the dictionary in the house. Like we didn't use it, but it came a little bit until I couldn't bring it up anymore. Don't talk about it. Never been there. Get me there. I'll see if I like it. Whatever. So whenever she said that, I just, I talked to Hashem a whole lot more. That was all it was. So I started praying, and I was praying every day. I was already spending a considerable amount of time with Hashem. And, in Breslov, we try to spend at least an hour in solitude talking to God. And so I would mention it, but it wasn't until I went to Uman, I think 1 year for Rosh Hashanah in Ukraine, that I was with a lot of different people there, and I just got so inspired. I said, all right, Hashem, I'm not going to let it down. So I went, there's a main street in Uman, Ukraine named Pushkin Street. At the end of it, it leads down to a lake. And this is, I think of like maybe a year before my hit song Hashem Ella came out with God Elbaz. So I was sitting by the lake over there, and I started praying. And I didn't know how long I was going to pray, but I said, God, I'm not going to let you up about moving to Israel. I'm going to pray, pray,
Mm,
and pray.
wow.
So I was praying 4 hours straight. I was talking
Mm.
God's head off. He was probably like, "Hey, can we get this guy out of here maybe
Yeah.
already?"
Just give him what he wants,
Just
right?
give him what he wants. This was second day Rosh Hashanah because I had prayed Nate's at sunset, so I had some time before the meal was going to happen. Few hours even. So I come back up and I had my meal and finished off the rest of the day Rosh Hashanah. And I remember calling home to my wife, and she said to me, "You're never gonna believe what happened. I had a dream that we were in Israel, and I was walking
Mm,
down the old city, and I heard a voice say everything's gonna be okay." She said, then the
wow.
song came on from this guy named Levi Robin, who was a well-known Jewish singer who we actually happen to adore. A song called "Don't Be Afraid of the Lion's Den." She tells me this dream. I didn't
Mm,
tell her at all what I prayed. I didn't say anything to her,
wow.
and so I said to her, I said, maybe Hashem's trying to tell us something. She said, nope, not moving there. Don't know the language. No, no, no. And I'm like, what's going on? So, it gave me enough encouragement that I prayed and prayed. I went like 7 days straight. I was crying, praying to God. And I remember I came back from this trip. I was in England over like for a week or something like that. And I remember coming back. I didn't say anything. She said, we have to move to Israel. That's it.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and it was like
Incredible.
it was her idea. So
Right,
that's
of
what happened
course.
in the end. I didn't bring it up anymore. It was all at the time I talked it off with Hashem. It just one of those things that we all, felt, and I think the whole time she felt it. But it's just the
What was
fear
it,
of
a hard
moving to a
move? Was it a
place.
hard transition for you and your children? For your
It
wife?
wasn't. It was in the beginning, just because you get there and you're just utterly confused. You have no idea.
Mm,
First off, you don't know the language. You don't have any
mm,
idea I don't know how many. I hope it's gotten better, but it's not so many resources all the time for new olim. People just
mm-hmm,
moved to Israel. There's a culture aspect of it. I come from a culture where if you bump into me, you cut me in line, you jab me, you step
mm.
on my shoe. That means you want to fight. Over there, it
Right,
means hi, how you doing?
right.
So it's
Right.
people stand in lines where I am from.
For
So
sure.
it was some adjusting that we had to
Right.
get to, but ultimately I don't think any of us would change it for the world. I've taken my kids on trips to America, Florida, New York. We've gone all over Vienna. I've taken them everywhere, and
Wow.
they're Israeli. They love
They're
being
happy
being
that
in
to be there at
Israel.
this point.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Wow. So I know you said that you're going to focus a little less on your music, but your music has become very, very popular. It's
right.
fascinating how you took music that was very gangster rap and all the other secular kind of stuff, or even against, spirituality and holiness, and now
Mhm.
you've transformed it into such holy music. Can you tell us a little about what you feel like, what your philosophy of music is, what you think about what music can do, and how you've done that?
It's very powerful, and I guess I should clarify. My goal is to travel less. I don't know how much. I guess that seems like I'll take a back step from music, but probably not as much. But the
Right.
truth is this: when I look at it from a philosophical standpoint and how I see things, uh, I share the same sentiment as anybody else who either before they became a fan, who considered themselves still very Larry, or was never a fan of my music, or whatever the case is. I was just as skeptical as everybody else. How am I going to take rap music, what I'm saying, and
Mm,
turn it into something else?
right.
I struggle. People don't understand how much I struggle with this. I retired from it prior to my Garris, thinking that I was done with it forever. If it wasn't for, feeling very strongly that it was something that I felt Hashem wanted me to do, and a little bit of pressure from my wife and best friend
Mm-hmm.
and some rabbis that I met in the community and different things, I wouldn't have returned to it. But what happened is over time, what I started to see is that it actually elevated my spirituality and my relationship
Mm-hmm.
and my connection with Hashem, because I felt such a achrayus to be able to use it as a tool to be able to spread light. I always say that if
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 to 3 minutes of a person's attention span, you have to some degree, I know it sounds crazy, but you have some bit of control over the person at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability where a person has made themselves completely vulnerable to you as a listener, and you have the opportunity to put in good messages, things of faith and restoration, hope. So or the opposite, So the
Right.
delicacy of music and the ability that it has to be able to change and to shape a person's life was became one of the most attractive things that called me, to some degree back to music.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is that there's a somewhat of idea. We do this in Judaism. We don't realize it, but first off, we say that any tune's inherently Jewish and it never had any, home or sound. I don't think we have too many songs like that.
Mm-hmm.
Jews forever. If you go to, European, the Ashkenazi Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Taimani, everybody has different styles of music. It can't be that this is all on
Right.
the playlist in the Beis Hamikdash. So the truth is that everybody has taken time and taste from every place that they were. Just happened to
Mm-hmm.
be that I came from where I came from. So the music that speaks to my soul is the music that I make, and which I'm very diverse listener also too. So I can listen to other things, but it just doesn't usually come out the same way that I heard it. So
Mm-hmm.
so there's an idea that we can take certain things and to bring them into holiness. Everything has its place in kedusha. There was
Mm-hmm.
a book called Or, where it was spoken about by Avram Chazan, who actually authored this many years ago before there were airplanes. He was talking about the air balloon, and he said that
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that in the future every person will be able to make it to their destination by the air, and he
Mm-hmm.
says so with every new invention. He says that Hashem allows for it to be created for the purpose of the glorification of His name, for
Right.
kedusha to be spread into the world. He said, but the rule is that the klippos get it first. The other side, the other
Mm-hmm.
side of darkness, always gets it first. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of our things is to be matahir it and to take it and to turn it into something that could be used, or something
Transform
that could
it.
be helped, and transform it into something of light. So that's really the way I feel about music and entertainment and everything right now. I think that we are up against a big battle. If a person thinks that, doing things in the old way, the only thing that we should have that was old, we should have old time emuna, old time faith like they used to
Right.
have.
Right.
But, I don't know if the old measures that were taken is going to actually help a generation that's been bombarded from all sides.
Right. No, that's for sure true. I mean, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was always very into taking modern technology. I mean, that's why we have the Chabad.org, and that's why we have you
So
here on
inspirational.
Chabad.org, right? Spreading holiness to
Right.
everyone around us.
So
So that's
inspirational. He was
yeah.
so inspirational. I mean, the Rebbe, and I don't say it enough, but I should say it even more. But the Rebbe is probably one of the biggest influential people to me. Him, my Rav Arush, who Rav Arush is his biggest inspiration. Also, too, was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, even as a
Mhm.
Breslover,
Right. Right.
because of that. I remember going to at 770 and seeing the radio room and going back there. Last
Mhm.
time I prayed at 770 on the Shabbos. I prayed in the Rebbe's office. I'm talking about electrifying, being in that place. It was like, the Rebbe understood what no other person understood. Yeah, he understood, and this is why the kavod that's due to him from all of Klal Yisrael, all different backgrounds, is because the Rebbe's foresight was beyond what anybody could ever say. To be able to take modern technology, where we's at a time, everybody's running from everything, right?
Mhm.
They're running from, and the Rebbe says, no, this is good, let's use it, that is the most powerful thing that you could do, to be able to take something and to use it for Hashem's purpose, which in essence, the Rebbe used, the radio. He used television. He used it for the purpose that Hashem actually created it for.
Mhm. That's
So
right.
it's a most powerful thing. Yeah, very very inspirational.
And that's what you're doing with your music. You're taking
As I'm
that
trying.
music, you're taking that style, and you're using. Is there a song that you have that's your favorite? Is it Hashem Malach, the one that you did with the
No, no, of course not. That can't be the hit. You know, you can never be the one hit song that everybody else loves is the
right,
artist's favorite, you know?
right.
I don't even know if it goes in the same. No, so I'm very passionate. I think there's probably two songs I'm most passionate about. So one of them is Change, where I speak a lot about just that I re-entered into my mind state of the struggle, you know, of wanting to change and being felt like you're being held back, you know, and crying to
Mhm,
Hashem that he should come and be a part of your life, and that only when he's there and only when he's there, then do I feel like everything's been cleansed. Only then I feel at home. Only then I feel, you know, that I'm
mhm.
in my place. So my song Change is, I would say is probably my favorite. I usually say that to the crowd before. That's how I usually introduce it as well.
Wow.
And then on the
Because you went
newest
through so many
album,
changes, so that makes
I went through
sense,
a lot
right?
of changes.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and being ready for the growth. And then I would say probably from the newest album that I just released, I would say there's a song on there named Aliyah. Right. So it's usually not the most popular song, but my song
Mhm,
Aliyah was a song that meant a lot for me because I was able to, and I took some like old styles. Feels very ethereal, I guess, gospel esh, like, you know, type of thing. I wanted to be able to take, you know, remember being able to hear like choirs, full choirs, but the roar of a multitude of people crying out to Hashem. We're not
mhm,
singing, nothing's pleasant, you know what I mean? Hashem, where are you? Where are you?
mhm.
So that's probably the song that resonates with me the most these days.
I think that's so much what people are asking, "God, where are you?" You know,
Right, right,
nowadays, it feels that
right,
way, so wow,
right.
incredible. So what do you want your listeners to feel when they're listening to your songs?
I want people to just, you know, to reflect and come as close to Hashem as they possibly can. You know, one of the things that at least I've been told from people is that I didn't have words and you gave me words. You know, I
Mhm,
didn't have words. I wanted to
mhm,
know how to talk to Hashem. I wanted to say something to him. I wanted to be able to be inspired, and you gave me the words. Those words are the ones, and that's what I strive for. I pray for it a lot also too. You know, in most songs, I would say I do have songs like Motherland Bounce, which probably not on my lowest level songs. Like people, you know, sometimes certain things are hits when you're just
mhm,
like, that was like the one song like I just really didn't care about, you know.
mhm.
So, and it was playful. It got taken a little bit more serious than it was supposed to get taken, but and it was sort of like a, you know, a fun song or whatever. But in general, like my comfort zone is taking my words of prayer and my own struggles and writing that to a song.
Mhm,
And I want people to feel me. I listen to my stuff over and over again, not because I'm obsessed with me,
mhm,
and not all the time because I'm a perfectionist. I'm more so worried about, did I execute the feeling? Is it
mhm,
convincing enough for the person listening to it that they can also feel themselves in the song? So
mhm.
that's very, very important for me, and I hope I'm able to accomplish that. And from what I'm told from a lot of people, that it's happening. So thank you, Hashem.
100%. Yeah, no, 100%. Is there I mean, you've done so many, performances in so many different places all over the world.
Right,
Were you know, including by many shluchim as well. Was there any
right.
place that you felt like you were inspired by the audience, that you felt an inspiration that you got from the audience?
Yeah. So you know, there's a lot of places where the audience is giving you the inspiration, but there's some times where, let me see if I could think of. Oh, come on, you're gonna put me on the spot. You know, there's a lot of shluchim. You're gonna feel a different way if I just pick out one place. Uh, I tell you, one of the biggest places I was inspired. I remember being in Satellite Beach, actually, and sitting at the table and just being able to hear so many sikhs and the Rebbe's Torahs over and over again
Mhm.
from the rabbi there. I always screw up the name of the kind of. He knows I know who he is, but
Hanukkah, right?
Kanakov.
Right.
So, but Rabbi Kanakov, like just to sit there at the table, I was just so inspired. We just talked Torah the whole entire time, but it was
Wow.
Lubavitcher Torah and Hasidus and whatever. So
And
that was
do you
probably
remember
it was.
what inspired you? Like, what words, what teaching inspired you from the Rebbe?
I don't remember exactly what teaching it was. It was the I think more than anything else, it was the fire with which
Mm,
to see him like so. I get passionate when I start bringing up
Mm,
a Breslov Torah. I bring up any type of chassidus. I get very, very passionate. But when I heard his Torah, there was one thing he told me. I can't remember off the top of my head. And what's funny is I've given it over before what he told me,
really?
and I can't remember what it was. It was Sipur. We did a lot of Sipurim of different stories of it, whatever, Rabbi
Right.
Shmuel, the Alter Rebbe.
Right.
But it was a fiery dinner that we had that night. But I remember leaving out of there just like, man, I was so inspired to like, go do Vodas Hashem, whatever the case was.
Wow.
So it was very, very nice of him. Um, if it comes back to me some way, it's gonna be
Okay.
right when I turn off
There.
the camera. It's gonna hit
Right.
me. I know it's gonna
It's
hit
okay.
me.
It's okay. We'll do a follow up.
This
There's
is
so much. There's
already 6 years
eh,
ago, 6, 7 years
yeah,
ago already.
and it still
So
hits you. Wow. No, we
yeah,
could always do a follow up with you. There's so much that I would love to sit and
you know what? I
discuss.
just
I
thought about it. I got to go back now to go tell them to repeat it.
right.
That's a
That's
chazara. I need a
right.
chazara.
Right.
But no, been a lot of different places, and Baruch Hashem, I feel like the shlichus is a big thing, and I make sure all of them know it. How much I feel like we're on the same team. My connection is, I never try to ever come to New York without going to the Rebbe's Ohel. So I'm a very, very big, you know, advocate of going. I try to go very late so I don't have to deal with
Mm,
any of the
sure.
running
The
in, extra
fans.
talking. Yeah, so, but just to go there very late. I remember being there late one time for a long time, and I started to think like, Rabbi, have such a, you know, just effect already on the Jewish world. Everybody keeps telling me, you're such a bridge. You should do this. You should do that. But I wasn't interested, not at all. I
Mhm.
was just so I was there for maybe 2, 3 hours, I think, by the Rebbe's Zohar. It was very late at night. I remember coming back in. Nobody was in, so I went and sat by the TV, and the Rebbe was talking about going to make Noachites of the nations and how important it
Really?
was. It was
Wow.
like that year. I said, no way, it can't be that this is what's happening to me. So it's a shlichus that I feel very, very strong in. And which made me just think now, probably the biggest inspiring, like I said, where the crowd gave me the most. Like I was almost in teary eyed, and I don't know if it was just because the moment over the time where it was. I remember it was in Dallas. I think it was my first
Mhm.
Hanukkah back on tour, and I think we did first night in Dallas, Texas. It was about 2,000 people that was there. Maybe half of them were non-Jews and were just as in, knew the music, knew everything, and that was a very, very inspiring crowd. I remember that night. It was just the electricity that was there. It was the people, and I hadn't toured. I think we all like, it was that longing of, all the lockdowns had sort of, I don't know, I probably never locked down in Texas, but I know by me, this was emotional. I was like let
Right.
out. Israel went crazy with this stuff. So by the time I was able to go do that tour and to be able to be there, and I released a
Mhm.
bunch of music at that time that you see numbers going up. You never know, but to go
Mhm.
there and it just was like the first time of hearing. It felt like the first time of hearing people singing your songs back to you in the crowd, and it's like I didn't really know. I'm kind of cut off. I've been
Mhm.
restricted. I've been releasing
Right.
music, but I haven't been able to be there with the audience to be able to get their feedback. So that was probably the most inspiring concert I could say that still has an effect on me.
Wow, incredible. There's so much that I could sit and talk with you. You're such a fascinating individual and you have such a fascinating life story. But
Thank you.
my last question to you will be just how do you keep your inspiration? You're still so on fire. You're still so feeling that connection and that godliness and that spirituality every moment. What's your secret for keeping that fire
So,
burning?
right. So in addition to the journaling, which even to be honest, I do less. But one of the biggest things that has been inspiring for me is that I try to make it a point to go and see righteous people. Like it's one of
Mhm.
those things where it's a very tough thing in this generation because we feel a little bit robbed. We feel a little bit orphaned. That I feel like wow, I never got
Mhm.
to see the rabbi. I never got a dollar from him. I didn't get to go
Mhm.
for electricity. But one of the beautiful things about being in Israel is that there's so many different people who are
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
tzaddikim, mashpias, who are people who are I guess mashpia would translate as influencer. But the truth is, it's like so many people there that are that are staples of righteousness. And I just make it a point to always go and be in their presence. I don't even have to ask questions. I don't have things on the time. It's just a very important thing to try to surround yourself with people who didn't forget why we're here in this world, and make it a
Mm-hmm.
habit. They do Hashem for a living. It's not just, I read something that people that live this day in, day out, and it's well known by the people, all over, that this is what these people do, and they
Mm-hmm.
live their life in total self-sacrifice for Hashem and for Torah, and it's such a booster. Sometimes I go to these people, I can't sleep from being in the presence of them,
Wow.
and but you got to go for the right reasons. The right reasons
Mm-hmm.
is to be inspired in order for
Mm-hmm.
you to serve God, and not to be inspired just to hang out. So for me, that's one of the biggest things that keeps me.
Beautiful. Wow. Wow. Nissim Black, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to
Thank
have you
you.
again a different time. This was so inspiring. Thank you for sharing with
Thank
us
you.
your journey and what
We
keeps you
finally made it
going.
happen. We were
Yeah,
worried. I kept on
exactly.
missing out.
I
Sorry,
know.
a lot of that was on me,
No
and I
problem.
apologize.
No
But I'm
problem.
happy
The
I had
main
the
thing is we
opportunity.
got it. We did it. So thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Wow, I just felt that was such a fascinating, fascinating story from Nissim Black. His journey is just absolutely incredible. There were so many things that I wanted to continue to ask him, but the time was just running away with us. I felt particularly what I really, really enjoyed was how he took his talent and how he took his past and didn't just leave it, but he actually used it. He transformed it into something positive. And that was really the lessons that he learned from his past, and how to, a person might first feel like, let me just leave it and let me just abandon it because there was so much negativity there. I mean, he grew up in a home, as he explained, where drugs were constantly being um, were all around him, and the music that his parents did and that he was doing. Yet he took that inspiration and didn't just leave it, but he actually changed it, transformed it, and created something so holy from it. I was blown away with his spirituality, with his inspiration and his dedication. And I was also blown away with how he surrounds himself with people who can keep on helping him to grow. And I thought that was such an incredible lesson, how he explained throughout his journey that it was when he was surrounded with people that were pulling him down, he got pulled down. But when he is, till today, he still surrounds himself with people who he feels are spiritual mentors, influencers who he can look up to and he could really learn from and be inspired from. And that helps him to pull himself up. And I thought that was an incredible message for all of us. When we surround ourselves with the people that we want to pull ourselves up, and we surround ourselves with the activities, when he was playing music that was pulling himself down, when he was composing music, he couldn't it was hard to separate those two parts of himself. And I think with us as well, when we do activities that are inspirational and that pull us up, and we surround ourselves with an environment that can help us grow, it really, really helps us to become the people that we want to become. I was also blown away with his talking to God, his prayers for hours and hours on a day, and how he felt that connection, he was answered with his prayers over and over and over again in achieving what he ultimately did, which was moving to Israel, with making Aliyah with his family, and surrounding himself in an environment where he feels is full of kedusha, holiness, as he says. I'm curious what you liked about this interview, what inspired you from Nissim Black. I'd love to hear it in the comments below. I'd love to hear what part of his journey spoke to you and speaks to you in your current situation. If you enjoy watching these videos, I hope that you are getting it by mail. I hope you are subscribed to Chabad.org/extraordinary. I hope you see us as well we're on YouTube, we're on Apple, Spotify, all platforms that have podcasts, so you can listen to us on the go. And we love to hear from you. We love to hear your feedback. We love to hear your comments. We love to hear how this has created an impact in your life. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of our extraordinary community.